I knew something was off the moment. I heard the clanking of chains outside my window at 6:30 in the morning. I threw on some jeans and bolted out the front door, just in time to see a tow truck backing up toward my dock with two HOA board members standing proudly beside it like they were putting up a trophy. "Hey," I shouted. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Wendy Whitmore, the HOA vice president and self-declared defender of neighborhood order, turned around with her usual smug attitude. She had that same ridiculous clipboard in her hand, the one she wielded like a judge's gavel. "Mr. Abram Archer," she said, drawing out my name like it offended her to say it. "Your boat is parked illegally. It's an eyesore. We've issued warnings." I stormed down the steps of my back deck, my boots thudding against the wooden planks, and stopped between her and the tow driver. "You touch that boat and I'll have you arrested," I said, keeping my voice low but firm. Wendy huffed, flipping papers. "You don't own this dock. The HOA maintains this entire shoreline. It's common space." "No, Wendy," I said, pulling my phone from my back pocket. "I do own it. And not just the dock. I own this whole strip, including the so-called common parking lot your board keeps using for HOA meetings." She blinked. I tapped the screen, pulled up the county parcel map, and thrust it in her face. "This dock, lot number 24B, my name's on it. And the parking lot, that's parcel 24C. Bought it 3 years ago at a city auction when your brilliant board let it go for unpaid taxes. You really should check your own records." The tow driver looked nervous. "Ma'am, if he owns it, I can't tow it." Wendy's color changed from smug pink to furious red. She spun on her heels. "This isn't over," she snapped. I chuckled. "It never is with you." I walked back to my boat, unhooked the chain they'd tried to wrap around the trailer, and leaned against the rail, watching them stomp back to their golf cart like cartoon villains. What Wendy didn't know was that I'd been quietly collecting deeds and rights to various little parcels around the neighborhood for years. I wasn't trying to make a point until now. They made it personal when they fined me for a boat parked on my own dock. And now it was war. By that afternoon, neighborhood gossip had already done its job. I caught glimpses of curtains shifting and a few neighbors giving me awkward waves as I pulled weeds from the edge of the dock. I didn't blame them. Most folks around here tried to stay on the HOA's good side not because they liked the board, but because they'd seen what happened to those who crossed it. Still, I wasn't about to let a group of overreaching retirees dictate how I lived on my own property. Around 5, I spotted a familiar beige sedan creeping to a stop in the lot. Out stepped Greg Talbot, HOA president, with his usual pressed polo and clipboard tucked under one arm like it was a badge of office. He walked toward me with the calculated pace of a man who thought negotiation was a form of intimidation. "You have a few minutes?" he asked, squinting from behind mirrored sunglasses. "Sure," I said, brushing dirt off my hands. "As long as you don't have a tow truck hidden around the corner." He didn't laugh. "I think we both know today's incident got a little heated," he said, glancing at the dock. "Let's not escalate things further." "You mean, let's not expose how your board's been using land it doesn't own?" He licked his teeth, clearly not used to being challenged. "If you're referring to the lot behind the community center," he said, "that land has been in use by the HOA for over 20 years. "Use isn't ownership," I said. "You stopped paying taxes on it 3 years ago. I picked it up legally. County records confirm that. You want to use it." "Lease it from me." His jaw shifted. "You're being unreasonable." Unreasonable is trying to tow private property off private land without verifying ownership. He pulled a folded sheet from his clipboard. "We're issuing a compliance order. The board has voted. Your boat violates community aesthetic guidelines." I didn't even glance at the paper. "You're going to regulate something sitting on land you don't control?" He didn't answer. "How about this?" I continued. "You trespass again, I file criminal charges, or better yet, we can take it all public. Let everyone know how the HOA's board has been operating community meetings, storing equipment, and collecting dues for services on land, It doesn't legally control. I'm sure the city zoning office would be interested, maybe even the local paper. His sunglasses dipped an inch. You wouldn't try me. Greg folded the paper back up and gave a short nod before walking off without another word. I watched him drive away, tires crunching over gravel I now owned. That night, I pulled out the manila folder I'd been keeping for just this kind of occasion. Inside were copies of every purchase record, tax receipt, and zoning map tied to the lots I'd acquired. I made duplicates 3 full sets and dropped one at my lawyer's office first thing the next morning. Just in case, by the end of the week, the HOA sent out a mass email. I wasn't mentioned by name, but the tone was unmistakable. Due to a clerical oversight, certain community spaces are undergoing ownership verification. All events scheduled at the eastern lot are suspended pending resolution. That clerical oversight was going to unravel more than they realized. Because once I started digging, I found more than just the dock and parking lot. Turns out, the board had been using a second parcel behind the community garden, a narrow strip of land where they stored maintenance tools and kept a shed full of documents for years. They assumed it was part of the same parcel as the garden. It wasn't. It had gone up for auction 6 months ago, and I had quietly bought that too, so I paid a visit to that shed. I brought my lawyer, a sheriff's deputy, and a key copied from the city's auction documents. The lock was old, rusted, and snapped off with one twist of the bolt cutter. Inside, we found more than old rakes and fertilizer. There were boxes of financial records. Some were official dues paid, invoices, repair costs, but others were handwritten ledgers, lists of names. Amounts paid in cash, no receipts, no matching entries in the official books. My lawyer photographed everything. The deputy said nothing, just nodded slowly and made a call to the station. An hour later, 2 plainclothes officers arrived and began collecting evidence. By that evening, word got out. A few neighbors stopped by my house, hesitant at first. But once they realized I wasn't planning to keep the lot off limits, they opened up. I always wondered why my dues went up every year, said Miss Lang from 2 doors down. But nothing ever got fixed. They fined me for repainting my shutters, said Mr. Patel. Said the color wasn't approved, but there's no list of approved colors. I paid for the community center rental 3 times, said a young couple from the corner. They told us the first 2 checks got lost. It was worse than I thought. The board wasn't just overzealous, they were siphoning funds. The next day, I met with the deputy again. He confirmed the sheriff's department was opening a formal investigation for financial misconduct and fraud. He also advised me to check the zoning office again. Turns out, the HOA had filed a petition to reclassify several lots as common space, including parcels they didn't own. They had tried to rewrite the map, but the city denied the petition. The reason? The required signatures were forged. Someone had copied names from old neighborhood petitions and submitted them as a new list. My name was on it. So were several others who'd moved away years ago. That crossed the line from shady to criminal. The city clerk forwarded the case to the district attorney's office. Charges were being prepared for forgery, fraud, and misappropriation of funds. Greg Talbot and Wendy Whitmore were the primary targets. The HOA board tried to go on damage control. They held an emergency meeting at the community center, barricading the doors to members only. But the crowd outside kept growing. By the time Channel 5's news van pulled up, they had no choice but to let reporters in. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. Instead, I sent the zoning maps, scan deeds, and photos of the documents from the shed to every neighbor's mailbox with a note. Facts speak louder than threats. The board dissolved 2 weeks later. A temporary committee was formed, this time elected properly. They asked me to serve on it. I declined, but offered to lease the parking lot and shed space back at $1 per year under the condition that all meetings be open, minutes published online, and finances reviewed quarterly by an independent accountant. They agreed unanimously. Justice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It showed up in resignation letters, criminal charges, and a neighborhood finally free from the grip of a corrupt board. The morning after the board's implosion, I was sipping coffee on my back deck when a white SUV pulled into the gravel lot my lot. A man in a navy blazer stepped out, holding a leather briefcase and shielding his eyes from the sun as he looked around. He didn't seem like a neighbor, too stiff, too polished. I met him at the edge of the dock. "You Abram Archer?" he asked. I nodded. He handed me a business card. It read, "Gavin Riley, Assistant District Attorney, County White Collar Crimes Division. Mind if I ask you a few questions?" he said. I motioned toward the picnic table under my pergola. "Sure, but you're probably going to want to take notes." Riley opened his briefcase and pulled out a legal pad. He didn't waste time. "We've got multiple complaints going back years, anonymous tips mostly, but nothing stuck. No one could prove anything. Then your name comes up, attached to 3 parcels the HOA had been using without permission. And suddenly, we've got documents, forged petitions, cash ledgers, and a storage unit full of HOA files the sheriff's office just got a warrant to search." I raised an eyebrow. "They had another stash, too, actually. One in the next town over, rented under a shell company with a fake address, but utility bills tied back to a Wendy Whitmore. That connect the dots moment was what we needed." He flipped a page and looked at me. "Did you ever attend any HOA budget meetings?" "Once," I said. "Back when I first moved in. They wouldn't let me ask questions without submitting them in writing 2 weeks ahead of time. That was the last time I bothered," he nodded. "That tracks. We've pulled their official minutes from the past 5 years. All formatted identically, all typed by the same person, no signatures, no timestamps. Even the votes are logged as unanimous, which is statistically impossible." I leaned back, letting that settle in. "So what happens now? We're filing charges against 4 board members: fraud, forgery, embezzlement, and conspiracy. But there's something else," he said, lowering his voice slightly. "We found a series of payments labeled Compliance Enforcement Monthly under the radar. Looks like they were paying a private security firm to do quiet favors. Towing, surveillance, sometimes intimidation." My jaw tightened. "You're saying they hired muscle?" Not quite that crude, but they definitely crossed some lines. "One of the invoices includes a line item for asset removal coordination dated 2 days before they tried towing your boat. Same company name. So towing wasn't just a mistake, it was planned." He closed the pad. "Planned and paid for with HOA funds. Funds that were supposed to cover landscaping and community events." I stood. "You'll have everything I've got: deeds, tax records, video from my property cameras, the whole timeline." Riley nodded. "Good. Because this isn't going to be a slap on the wrist." He left shortly after, and I spent the rest of the afternoon scanning and backing up every document I hadn't already shared. By sundown, my inbox dinged with a message from a local investigative journalist. She wanted an interview. I wasn't sure about going public, but the way I saw it, silence only helped the people who'd been abusing power for years. We met the next morning at the diner just outside the neighborhood. She was sharp, mid-30s, with a recorder and a yellow legal pad filled with actual handwritten questions, not just talking points. "I've covered HOAs before," she told me after we ordered. "But this one's different. The level of coordination, the forged signatures, the off-site storage, it's organized." "It is," I said, "and it's been happening under everyone's nose." "Why do you think no one blew the whistle until now?" I thought about that for a moment. Fear, apathy, maybe both. "They made examples out of people, fines, threats, social pressure. It worked until it didn't." She leaned in. "What made you push back?" I didn't hesitate. "They tried stealing something I owned. That's not a mistake, that's a message. I sent one back." She smiled, scribbling notes. "You mind going on the record? Use my name. I've got nothing to hide." The article ran 2 days later. Front page of the Sunday Local. HOA power grab exposed. Resident uncovers years of fraud, corruption. There was a photo of me standing on the dock, arms crossed, With the boat behind me like a trophy they failed to steal, the fallout came fast. The county's attorney general issued a statement confirming a full audit of the HOA's financials. Several former board members were subpoenaed, and Greg Talbot, arrested walking into his golf club with a duffel bag full of HOA documents he'd tried to sneak out of his garage that morning. Wendy was picked up later that evening at her sister's lake house. She claimed she was just visiting, but her trunk was already packed. Their legal defense tried to argue misunderstanding of administrative boundaries. But the evidence was overwhelming: county maps. Email threads recovered from a laptop in the storage unit. Even a voice recording of a board meeting where they joked about keeping the sheep grazing quiet. That one made the evening news. Meanwhile, the interim committee asked for volunteers to help rebuild the HOA from the inside out. I still wasn't interested in joining, but I did offer to host a town hall-style Q&A on my lot, open to anyone. No agenda, no nonsense. The turnout surprised me. Nearly every household sent someone. Folding chairs filled the gravel lot and folks brought snacks, kids, even their dogs. For the first time since I'd moved in, the neighborhood felt like a community. We didn't just talk about fixing things. We talked about transparency, accountability, and how to make sure power didn't get concentrated in the hands of a few again. A retired CPA offered to audit the books for free. A local paralegal offered to draft a new set of bylaws. People stepped up. That night, under string lights hung between trees, I realized something. They hadn't just tried to tow my boat. They tried to isolate me, to scare me into submission, and it blew up in their faces. The DA's office pressed forward with charges. Trial dates were set. Plea deals were offered, some accepted, some rejected. Greg chose to fight. Wendy tried to paint herself as a misled volunteer. Neither strategy worked. The jury convicted both of them. Sentences weren't heavy white-collar crime, rarely gets you anything close to what you'd expect, but the damage to their reputations was permanent. The state also opened a civil suit to recover misused funds. The money would be returned to the HOA's new account, managed by a third-party fiduciary until confidence was restored. And the best part? The parcels I owned stayed in my name. No one contested them, not even the county. The board's forged petition attempt disqualified them from ever claiming easement again. Weeks later, I stood at the edge of the dock during sunset, watching the water ripple under soft orange light. A neighbor I hadn't met before walked up, holding a beer. "Hey," he said, nodding toward the boat. "Heard you gave them hell," I chuckled. "I just gave them facts," he held up his bottle. "Thanks for doing what the rest of us were too nervous to." We clinked bottles, and for once no clipboard-waving bureaucrat interrupted us. The neighborhood wasn't perfect, but it was freer. And that was enough. 2 months after the trial, a certified envelope landed in my mailbox with the county seal stamped across the front. I opened it on the spot, fingers brushing flakes of adhesive onto the gravel at my feet. Inside was a formal notice from the county recorder's office confirmation that the HOA's corporate status had been officially dissolved, along with a letter from the district attorney's office thanking me for cooperating with the investigation. Attached was a notice of restitution. Nearly $40,000 had been recovered from the frozen HOA accounts and redirected to the new fiduciary fund for the neighborhood. I folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. It felt like a quiet exhale after months of tension. No more threats, no more clipboards, no more fake compliance forms shoved into mailboxes. That weekend, the temporary committee hosted a neighborhood cleanup. Not mandatory, no fines, just volunteers, coffee, and a rented dumpster. For the first time since I'd moved in, no one brought up enforcement or aesthetic standards. People wore mismatched gloves, brought their kids, and laughed when someone found an old lawn gnome buried behind the shed. Even the cranky guy from Lot 12 brought donuts and stayed the whole morning. I spent most of the day helping clear out the overgrown trail that ran along the eastern edge of the old parking lot. A few teens hauled out rusted fence posts and bundles of tangled chicken wire while their parents cleared brush at the edge. When we finished, I stayed behind, watching the sun break through the canopy and cast patterns along the water's edge. Around midday, a woman approached mid-40s, work boots, a faded university sweatshirt. She wiped her hands on her jeans and offered a firm handshake. "Name's Dana," she said. "I'm the new chair of the transition committee. People said I should talk to you." I nodded. "What do you need?" She glanced at the newly cleared trail. "We're trying to get a conservation easement approved for that strip, keep it from ever being developed. Thought maybe you'd be willing to help us draft the proposal." A few birds scattered from the trees as someone started a leaf blower down the path. "You've got the right people now," I said. "Just make sure you keep it public. No more hidden meetings. No more backroom decisions." She gave a quick nod. "That's the plan." A week later, I was asked to attend a city council meeting not as a resident but as a witness. The council had opened a broader inquiry into HOA oversight across the county. Turns out my neighborhood wasn't the only one where things had gone sideways. 3 other associations were now under review, and the council wanted testimony from someone who'd helped bring one down. The chamber was packed the night I showed up. Suits filled the front rows. Reporters flanked the walls. I sat at the table facing the council, a microphone in front of me and a pitcher of water sweating beside it. The council chair, a man with a gray beard and a voice like gravel, gestured for me to begin. I told them everything: how the board used forged signatures to try and rezone private land, how they funneled dues into cash-only accounts, how they hired off-the-books contractors to intimidate residents. I described the fake compliance orders, the attempt to tow my boat, and the discovery of ledgers hidden in a shed on a lot they didn't own. When I finished, the room was silent for a beat. Then the chair leaned forward. "Mr. Archer, in your opinion, what could have prevented this?" "There should have been oversight," I said. "Mandatory audits, term limits, transparency laws with actual teeth." I paused, then added, "and neighbors who aren't afraid to speak up." They thanked me. The city passed a new ordinance 2 weeks later requiring all HOAs to submit annual financial reports to the city clerk's office. Any HOA that failed to comply would lose its authority to collect dues or enforce regulations. That was the first domino. Within a month, a state senator introduced a bill to regulate HOAs statewide. It included whistleblower protections, a public database of board members, and mandatory training for anyone seeking election to an HOA board. The bill passed with bipartisan support. Back in the neighborhood, things had changed. The new committee rebranded itself as a neighborhood council. They held open meetings at the community center, this time on chairs borrowed from the church, instead of folding metal ones locked behind a gate. Residents voted on everything, from budget allocations to which local vendor would handle landscaping. The bylaws were rewritten from scratch, this time with input from everyone, and me. I returned the favor. I transferred the parking lot and the shed parcel to the council for $1 each, with a clause in the deed that restricted any future sale or transfer without a supermajority vote from all residents. I kept the dock, though. That was personal. One evening, I got a knock at the door. It was a boy, maybe 14, holding a clipboard and wearing a shirt that read Civic Club. He asked if he could interview me for a school project about local government. I let him in and poured 2 glasses of lemonade. We sat at the kitchen table while he scribbled notes in frantic cursive. "Why'd you do it?" he asked. "Why not just move away?" I leaned back and glanced out the window at the dock, where the water was calm and gold under the setting sun. "Because if you let people take what's yours once, they'll try again," I said. "And because this place is worth fighting for." He nodded, eyes wide, and kept writing. That night I walked down to the dock with a book and a folding chair. The lake was quiet, the wind just enough to make the ropes creak gently against the cleats. The lights from the newly repaired trail cast a soft glow along the shoreline. Somewhere nearby, a group of kids laughed as they played flashlight tag. I opened my book but didn't read. Just sat there, listening to the sounds of a neighborhood finally at ease. Behind me, a new sign had been hammered into the gravel lot. It read, "Community space maintained by Neighborhood Council open to all residents, no fines." No threats, no clipboards. Justice didn't always come with flashing lights or courtroom drama. Sometimes, it came in the form of neighbors working side by side, a trail reopened, or a kid asking questions because he believed the answers mattered. I sat there until the sun disappeared and the stars began to rise one by one over a neighborhood that finally belonged to its people again.